we said that we're going to need to be able to calculate half-widths in different ways depending on how the data compare to each other in terms of variance and how the data were generated in terms of independence with each other. And we always generate half-widths because we're effectively always doing two sample t-tests. We're just doing different types of two sample t-tests, and the only difference in that is how we're going to calculate this uh, degrees of freedom and standard error of the mean difference between them. But once we've calculated a half-width, we can generate a confidence interval, and then we then go back to this general approach of seeing, is 0 in the confidence interval? If it is, then these two systems, we can't tell a difference between them. If 0 is firmly on one side or the other, then we can tell a difference. So let's assume that our two systems have equal variance. And so we've run system 1 and we've run system 2, and we have good reason to assume that they both are normally distributed. They both are independent of each other and within replicates as well. And the variance in the system 1 population is equal to the variance in the system 2 population. In that case, we are going to then take all of the data from system 1 and system 2 and estimate the common variance between them by using all of that data. And so this first formula is the variance for one of the systems. So imagine this is S1. So S1 squared is going to be the difference between the individual data from one replicate of S1 minus the mean from all the replicates of S1, and then those differences get squared, and we're kind of taking an average where the average is divided not by the number of replicates for system 1, but the number of replicates for system 1 minus 1, because we used an estimate of the mean and not the true mean, and so we lose a degree of freedom because of that. And that ends up giving us an unbiased estimator of the variance. And we can do that for both system 1 and system 2. If we already have calculated variance for system 1 and system 2, the way we pool those variances is we scale system 1's variance by the number of replications in system 1 minus 1, and then we scale system 2's variance by the number of replications from system 2 minus 1. And then we add all that together and divide that sum by the total degrees of freedom between the two of them, which is just the number of replications in system 1 plus the number of replications in system 2 minus 2. If you want to know where this comes from, if you just think about it, S1 squared would have a formula that looks like this, and if you multiply it by R1 minus 1, you're effectively canceling out this front term here. So this just becomes, this product here just becomes the sum of all of these differences. And similarly, for S2, if you multiply by this thing, you're going to get rid of this, and this becomes a sum of these differences. So this really just becomes, this is like this formula up here is just this down here, but sometimes you're using system 1 data and sometimes you're using system 2 data. So we have this many degrees of freedom, and we have this standard error of the mean. And this standard error of the mean this is the pooled variance. And so from this pooled variance, we can then estimate the standard deviation of the mean, and we end up getting this formula right here. And if you're not quite sure where that formula comes from, well, actually approach 2 will give you a better idea of how to derive this formula. But the basic idea here is that we have two formulas, one for the degrees of freedom and one for the standard error of the mean. And if we were to go back, we can plug those into our half-width formulas, and we can now generate a half-width based on this pooled variance assumption, a confidence interval based on a pooled variance assumption. But we always want to use pooled variance if we can, because they're more powerful than the unequal variance approaches when the sample size is low. And that's just because when the sample size is low, you don't have enough samples to really estimate the variance very well. But let's see what happens when we have to do an unequal variance t-test. And so if we are pretty sure that our variances are unequal, or we aren't that sure that they're equal between the two systems, then but we are sure that the two systems are independent, then we can make use of some basic probability here. And so if you know that you have independent random variables A, B, and C, then all of these properties hold. So like the variance of a random variable a divided by a scalar k is just the variance over a divided by k squared, and this is just another notation for that. The variance of three independent random variables added together is the sum of their variances, and the variance, and this doesn't have to do with being independent, but the variance of any random variable made negative is just the variance of the positive random variable. So you take all of these things, and if you have a formula like this one, then you can very easily get a formula for the variance in terms of the individual variances of the random variables going into this formula. So it's a way for us to kind of distribute, if you will, the variances inside this formula. So if we look at what the formula for standard error of the mean here is for our unequal variance case, where we can't pull the variances, it's just the square root of the standard deviation of this thing. It's just the standard deviation of this thing, which is the square root of the variance. So but this here, variance y1 minus y2, because these are independent, that's just the sum, variance y1 plus variance y2. Now we can take each one of these individual terms here, and we can expand it. The variance of y1 is just going to be, well, how do we estimate y1? Or I should say y1 bar. Well, y1 bar is just the arithmetic mean of all the replicates that came out of system 1. And so this is a variance of a sum, which again, because we're assuming independence, we end up getting a sum of variances. And so we can simplify this whole thing, and we find that the variance of the mean is equal to the variance of the individual outcomes of each simulation divided by the number of replicates. And this is where the standard error of the mean comes from, because if you take the square root of this thing, you end up getting standard deviation in the top and square root of the number of replications in the bottom. If we take this expression and we put it into this expression here and here, we now have a formula for standard error of the mean, which looks like this. And so we can estimate the individual variances for system 1 and system 2 and plug them in, and now we have that formula there. And you should recognize that this formula looks very similar to this formula if these two variances were the same. Because if these two variances were the same, you could factor that out, take the square root, and you'd end up getting this formula. So that's where that comes from. Okay, so this is not too complicated of a formula for standard error of the mean, but the degrees of freedom are kind of ugly. So I'm not going to go into the derivation of that, but the point here is that you can now calculate a confidence interval using an unequal variance assumption, so unpooled test, but you just need to make sure that you set the degrees of freedom when you look up that critical t-value properly, and then you also set the standard error of the mean properly. And this approach will work well when you have a lot of replicates from R1 and R2. So a lot of replicates from System 1 and System 2. If you have less than 7 of either one of those, you really don't have a good estimate of the variance. And so this doesn't really perform very well. So again, so pooling gives us more statistical power, but if you really can't pool, this is what you have to do. But if you don't have that many replicates to really get good estimates of S1 squared and S2 squared, then you may just have to look for a totally different test that doesn't have these normality assumptions and so on and so forth. Okay. For both of those, like I was saying, the approach is we take the formula for the standard error, plug it in here, the formula for the degrees of freedom, plug it in to grab your critical t-value, and you now have the ability to generate confidence intervals like the ones that we opened with. And those confidence intervals, because they're confidence intervals on the difference between the two systems, then all we're really testing is whether 0 is in the confidence interval or not. And knowing where 0 is tells us if the two systems are different or not. All right, now let's twist things a little bit here and say, well, what other ways in which can we compare two systems? Now, if those two systems, if the experimental design is such that there is no way to treat the output of the two systems as independent, like this could be for a number of reasons. So like the common example is if you take measurements of arm length and leg length, and you're trying to look for some relationship between arm length and leg length. Well, when you measure arms and legs, you really need to account somehow for the fact that a person's arm and a person's leg are shared. They're paired. So I can't use if I'm interested in the difference between arms and legs to each other, it's kind of not fair for me to take all the arms as independent samples and take a simple mean, and take all the legs as independent samples and take a mean. So the right way for me to say that legs are statistically longer than arms is for every person to subtract the arm length from the leg length and then do a one sample t-test on the difference of that. And if that one sample t-test is significantly different than 0, then that tells me that legs are significantly longer than arms. But it would be wrong for me to do a two sample t-test on the average arm length and the average leg length, because there could be important correlations in there that I am suddenly throwing out. So in this case, I'm introducing a correlation into simulations to induce a pairing for good reasons. And so we'll see what those good reasons are. But the way in which we do that is to give the same random number seed to two different sims. So you have your simulation of system A, you have your simulation of system B, and they both have random number generators. And we're going to put the same seed in the random number generators to those both sims. And that would be like equivalent to putting the same string of callers into two different sims. So we have a sim that's with cross-training and a sim without cross-training. And we are going to test the two simulations by giving them the exact same colors going into that. That would be very difficult to do in the real world, but if we do that in simulation, which we can do, and we manage to introduce positive correlation between the two simulations, then we can actually reduce the variance in the difference of the means, and that gives us more statistical power. So what I'm basically saying here is we know this variance here, this is the variance and the difference of the means. When these two are independent, it's just these two terms, but in general, it's these two terms minus 2 times this covariance term. The covariance is just a measure of the correlation between these two variables, y1 bar and y2 bar. And so this is the formula for covariance, and so this is the correlation here. If the correlation here is positive, then we're going to have the kind of independent case here where it's just the sum of the two variances minus a little bit. So we're going to actually be able to reduce the variance in this. And if you think about the standard error of the mean, then this is going to reduce the numerator of the standard error of the mean, and that's going to then shrink the confidence interval. So we can shrink confidence intervals without adding replications by adding correlations between the two different things. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to shrink these confidence intervals. And then if we can do that, then any difference that remains between system A and system B must be a true difference between the two systems. So if I were just to throw a random string of callers into the non-cross-trained version and then a random string of callers into the cross-trained version, and I notice a difference in performance, that might have just been that the one system got a better set of callers than the other. But if I run the same callers through both systems and then I notice a difference, then in that case I really can trust that the change that I made in the system is causing that difference. In the arm and leg example, you might notice that that if there's a lot of variation in arm length and leg length across the population, then you may not actually pick out the right signal. But if you can consistently say that on every individual, their leg is longer than their arm, then you end up picking out the signal because you focus on the difference per individual and not the population level difference between the mean leg length and the mean arm length. And so you can become more meaningful, so to speak, by pairing these means together. So we use paired difference t-tests in order to generate these confidence intervals. And so, imagine you just take the block differences. So for system 1, every replication R, you subtract system 2's same replication R that's paired together. They have the same random number seed for that replication. And for different replications, there's different seeds, but for always the same replication number. And remember, we have the same number of replications on both. So for the replication index, we always have the same random number seed. And then we calculate the average distance, the average difference, d bar, and the average variant, and the variance of those differences, and then we end up getting a standard error of the differences. So this is the standard error of the mean the same way, and then we also, the degrees of freedom end up being very simple in this case. And so this is our confidence interval. So now we can calculate a confidence interval even for the paired test. And in all of them, we all interpret them the same way. Is 0 in the confidence interval or not? Okay, so let's go back to Canvas and answer a couple of questions. And then in the next section, we're going to look at what we do when we want to compare more than two systems.